On this toy spot, we're going to be looking at the initial first wave of Justice League figures. Today we're going to be looking at Batman. And if you enjoyed my Superman review of the Justice League, then this hopefully is along those same lines. If you didn't enjoy it and you found it really boring, well, I hope to condense it a little more than what I did with the Superman. Like I said, there's a bit to go over, surprisingly, for a 5-point articulated figure. But the Batman came out. It was, like I said, the very initial first wave of Justice League. There was a Superman and a Batman that was released as a standalone with bases with a diorama. But they were actually repaints. The initial first accurate colored Batman was a singular carded Batman that came with the stand. And as you can see, much like the Superman stand, this Batman comes with the emblem. It says Justice League The Dark Knight, and it says ICE down below. Why does it say ICE? Well, because you have to connect it with the other stands. Somewhat ironic, though, the fact that Batman's stand has ICE, and one of Batman's villains, of course, is Mr. Freeze. Is it a coincidence? I don't know. It might be. But the figure stand, we'll get into that just in a second here. This was the initial wave Batman. Like I said in the Superman review, the initial first waves, or the initial Justice League figures, only had 5 points of articulation. So the head could move completely around if you wanted to. Not that I would recommend that for poor Batman's sake. You could adjust the arms, left and right, back and forth, and you can also move the legs. That's all they could do, which would necessarily not be a bad problem, because if you've collected the Batman figures from the animated line, if you've collected the Superman figures, they all tend to have that same articulation. Mattel, however, in their infinite wisdom, ended up giving us, I'll move Batman aside here, ended up giving us a updated Batman. As you can see, it still shares the same color scheme. Although the only difference is that they've given us the additional articulation in the arms and the elbows there, and in the legs. The one thing I was mentioning with the Superman figure is very true with the Batman figure as well. The additional articulation, while it was nice for play value, the downside, though, to it is, while this Batman was somewhat slender, he was still pretty broad. If you compare him over to the garishness of the arms on Batman here, I mean, he's so wide just so they could accommodate these additional arms. I mean, look how big these forearms are. I've also mentioned in the Superman review that the pegs were more predominant. This was the second release Batman, or actually the first release with the additional articulation. If I move this guy over and I bring in the later released articulated Batman, you'll see that they've cleaned up the joints a little bit better. Like the pegs aren't as predominant on these figures. You will notice, though, that the color is a little bit different versus the lighter gray. They then switched to a more flesh-colored face, and they've given us more of a bluish-gray colored outfit. This outfit stayed consistent right actually up to, I believe, the single-carded Batman that included the Wonder Pig. By that point, they'd actually gone back to the 5-pointed articulated Batman, but they tweaked it a bit, that he no longer has black. What instead they've done is they've given him more a blue cowl. While I don't know if I necessarily agree with that decision, I don't know if again, the problem with these Batmans is the fact that they're just too broad. They're just too wide. Look how wide they are. I think that's almost too much. But I'll move those out of the side. Move those out of the way there. And like I said, going back to the Batman here. Batman's been released several times, unfortunately. Numerous repaints, numerous accessory repacks. And I would say most of the accessories and most of the repaints usually were on this mold rather than this mold here. As well, if you picked up the Justice Lord versions of these guys, the Justice Lords would be repaints of the additional articulated Batman, Superman, Flash, what have you. Although really Flash wasn't a Justice Lord if you've watched the episode. It would have been nice if they had repainted this because, like I said, most of the molds are now going back to the more limited articulated figures, but it's not really a big deal. The stand, as I mentioned earlier, has ice. As you can see, same blue as the Superman, and it has the same Justice League card on the one side, the one image, and then on the other side it's the motion Batman there. You can peg it into place. I mean, you can peg it really either way. I usually peg it with the motion card on the one side. That way you can see it when you put the figure on. And there you have Batman. I suppose really what I could do is I could bring in Superman if you guys want to see just how it goes together. Now they've actually done it, and I'll do this more when I get all figures finished reviewing. I put them all together, but they've done it in a way that you've got ice and lid. And it's strange that they actually didn't put Superman at the front of Justice, like in the Just part. Why he would be put here, I really don't know, but like I said, these will all go together and then form Justice League. I'll do that all when I finish reviewing the figures here. And I'll move Superman out of the way. I'm mentioning actually, and I'll try to wrap this up here because, like I said, there's not really a lot to say, but I'll bring in the Two-Face from the later released Batman figure line. And as you can see, this one's scaled actually not too bad. But if I was to bring in like the Riddler, for example, the Riddler actually is a little too tall, I think, for being at Batman with Batman here. But it's decent figures. I mean, there's not really a lot to say about them. And like I said, a very confusing set of reviews to do these because there's so many gray. I mean, when you release the sets and when you see the 3-packs, you'll see how often some of these figures actually reappear. It's almost to the point of nausea, but needless to say, that was a toy spot. Get them pegged into place here. That was a toy spot, hopefully a successful toy spot on the Justice League first wave. This was the stand included Batman. And stay tuned for the remaining figures from this set. Like I said, I'll put all the set together. You guys can see the set completely intact. And I'll see you guys then. Later.